On Father's Day, my millionaire son asked, "Dad, how's that $280 Lisa sends you?" I almost choked on my coffee. You know how sometimes life hits you with a curveball when you least expect it. Well, that's exactly what happened to me last Father's Day. I'm Harold Bennett, 62 years old, been living alone in my 2-bedroom ranch house on Maple Street in Austin since my wife Sarah passed from cancer 6 years ago. That Sunday afternoon in my backyard changed everything I thought I knew about trust in family. My son Tony came over for our usual Father's Day barbecue around 3 in the afternoon. The Texas heat was already brutal, must have been pushing 95 degrees, but we always did our celebrating on the back patio under the big oak tree Sarah and I planted when we first bought this place 25 years ago. Good kid Tony is. 35 now, works as a software engineer at some tech company downtown in one of those glass towers. Makes decent money, drives a nice Ford F-150, lives in one of those new developments out in Cedar Park with his wife Lisa. They'd been married about 3 years at that point. So there I was, standing over my old Weber grill, flipping burgers and listening to the sizzle, cold Lone Star in my hand, thinking life was pretty good despite everything. The afternoon breeze was carrying the smell of barbecue smoke across the neighborhood, mixing with the scent of Sarah's jasmine vine that still blooms every summer by the back fence. Tony walks up to me, puts his arm around my shoulder like he used to when he was little, and says with that easy smile of his, "Dad, I hope that $2,800 a month is helping out. Lisa's been handling the transfers to make sure you're comfortable." I nearly dropped my spatula right there on the concrete patio. The beer bottle went cold in my hand, and I could feel my heart skip a beat. $2,800? I said, trying to keep my voice steady while my mind started racing. "Son, what exactly are you talking about?" Tony's face went from relaxed to confused real quick, like when you're expecting one thing and get hit with something completely different. His eyebrows scrunched up the way they used to when he was a kid trying to figure out his math homework. "The monthly allowance, Dad. I've been sending it for 8 months now, ever since you mentioned things were getting tight after Mom's medical bills and all." That's when my blood went cold despite the heat radiating off the grill. For the past 8 months, I'd been living like a man on a strict budget, clipping coupons from the Austin American-Statesman every Sunday, buying the generic brands at H-E-B instead of the name stuff I'd always preferred, stretching my Social Security check and that little pension from Mutual Assurance like they were made of elastic. I'd even started eating lunch at the Sunset Valley Senior Center twice a week because the meals were 350 Zared and filling, and I could get dinner conversations with folks my own age without having to cook for one person every night. "Tony," I said, setting down my beer on the weathered picnic table where we'd eaten hundreds of meals over the years, "I haven't received a single dollar." The look that crossed his face told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't some banking error or mix-up with the mail service. Someone had been taking money that was meant to keep his old man living with dignity. And we both knew exactly who had the access and opportunity to pull something like this off. Lisa appeared on the patio right then, like she had some kind of radar for when her name might come up in conversation. Blonde hair pulled back in one of those messy buns that probably took 20 minutes to make look casual, wearing a designer sundress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, carrying a glass bowl of potato salad and wearing that sweet smile she always put on around me. "Harold, those burgers smell absolutely wonderful. You're such a good cook, better than any restaurant." I looked at her differently that afternoon. Really looked at her for the first time in months. The new Coach purse hanging on the back of her chair. I knew enough about women's accessories from 35 years of marriage to Sarah to recognize quality when I saw it. Probably $400, at least the diamond stud earrings catching the late afternoon sunlight, bigger than the ones she'd worn at Christmas. The fresh manicure with that perfect polish that meant she'd been to one of those fancy nail salons in the Domain, all while her father-in-law had been counting quarters to make sure he could afford ground beef instead of the good steaks. "Lisa," I said, keeping my voice as calm and level as I could manage, like I was discussing the weather or asking about her job. "Tony was just telling me about the monthly money transfers he's been sending my way." Her smile didn't even flicker, didn't miss a beat, didn't show a trace of surprise or confusion. Just that same sweet expression, like she'd been expecting this conversation and had her answer ready. "Oh yes, isn't that wonderful? We just want to make sure you're taken care of. Harold, family has to stick together, especially after everything you've been through." That was the exact moment I knew for certain. No surprise in her voice, no questions about what transfers or how much money we were talking about. Just smooth practiced agreement like she'd rehearsed this response in front of her bathroom mirror. Like she'd been preparing for the day someone would ask her about money that should have been coming to me but somehow never made it past her hands. The rest of that barbecue felt like I was watching it happen to someone else. We ate the burgers, talked about Tony's work projects and the heat wave, made small talk about the neighbors and whether the Astros had a shot at the playoffs this year. But underneath it all, my mind was working like it used to back in my auditing days at the insurance company, adding up numbers and timelines and opportunities. $22,400. That's what the math worked out to when I sat down with my calculator later that evening. 8 months times $2,100. Money that was supposed to help me live comfortably in my retirement years. Maybe take a vacation somewhere, or fix the air conditioning unit that had been making funny noises all summer. After they left around 7 that evening, Lisa chattering about some sale at Nordstrom and Tony still looking confused and troubled, I sat in my old leather recliner in the living room. The same chair Sarah and I had picked out at the gallery furniture store 15 years ago, back when we thought we had all the time in the world. The late sunlight was streaming through the front windows, highlighting all the dust motes floating in the air and making the family photos on the mantel glow like they were lit from within. I'll admit, part of me wanted to jump in my truck right then and drive over to their house in Cedar Park, march up to that fancy front door with the decorative glass panels and raise hell about what had been done to me. But I'd spent 30 years working in the insurance business, investigating fraudulent claims and tracking down people who thought they could game the system. If you learn anything in that field, it's that emotion makes you sloppy and evidence beats passion every single time. You don't accuse someone of stealing from you without ironclad documentation to back up your claims. The next morning, I was dressed and ready by 8 a.m., sitting in my truck in the parking lot of First National Bank on South Lamar before they opened for business. Been banking there since Tony was in high school playing football for the Wildcats. The building itself isn't much to look at, brown brick from the 1980s with those tinted windows that make it look like every other small bank in Texas. But the people inside had always treated me right. Karen Davis was working the customer service desk when I walked in. I'd known her for probably 10 years, watched her work her way up from teller to account manager. Professional woman in her 40s with short brown hair and the kind of efficient manner that made you trust she knew what she was doing. "Good morning, Harold," she said with a genuine smile as I approached her desk. "How can I help you today?" "Karen, I need to check something and I need you to be thorough about it. Can you verify if there have been any transfers into my accounts from my son's account?" "Anthony Bennett. He says he's been sending me $200 monthly for the past 8 months. She pulled up my account information on her computer screen, and I watched her face carefully as she scrolled through months of transaction history. Her expression shifted from routine professional interest to concern, then to something that looked like sympathy mixed with confusion. "Harold, I'm looking at all your accounts, and I'm sorry to tell you this, but there's nothing here from Anthony. Your only regular deposits have been your Social Security on the 3rd of each month, and that pension payment from Mutual Assurance on the 15th. My hands were shaking slightly when I signed the printed statements she gave me. 3 pages of transactions covering the past 8 months, every deposit and withdrawal documented in black and white. Social Security, pension, a few small cash deposits from odd jobs I'd done for neighbors, but 0 transfers from Tony's account. Not $1 of the $22,400 that should have been there. Walking back to my truck in that bank parking lot, I felt something I hadn't experienced since the day the doctor told us about Sarah's diagnosis. That hollow feeling in your chest when reality shifts under your feet and you realize the world isn't quite what you thought it was. But I also felt something else stirring, something I remembered from my days investigating insurance fraud cases. The quiet anger that comes when you know someone has played you for a fool, combined with the methodical determination to prove it and make them face the consequences. Someone had been stealing from me for 8 months. Someone who sat at my dinner table and called me family. Someone who had looked me in the eye and lied with a smile. Time to find out exactly how they'd done it. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done since my auditing days at Mutual Assurance. I cleared off the dining room table, the same oak table where Sarah and I had paid bills for 20 years, and spread out every bank statement, receipt, and financial document I could find. The afternoon light coming through the lace curtains made everything look official, like I was back in my office on the 12th floor downtown, piecing together insurance fraud cases. I called Rick Martinez, the chief accountant at Tony's company. Rick and I had met several times over the years at company barbecues and Christmas parties. Solid guy in his 50s, the kind of man who wore pressed shirts even on weekends and kept his word when he gave it. More importantly, he'd worked in financial services long enough to understand what numbers could tell you about people's behavior. "Rick, I need a favor, and I need you to keep this between us for now," I said, pacing around my kitchen with the cordless phone. "Can you verify if my son has been making monthly transfers to someone named Harold Bennett? I'm talking $200 and $800 a month for the past 8 months. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could hear papers shuffling in the background and the faint sound of office noise, phones ringing, keyboards clicking. The background hum of a busy workplace. Harold, you know I can't give you specific account details, Rick said carefully, but I can tell you this much. Yes, those transfers have been going out like clockwork. Same day every month, 15th. Automated transfer. But Harold, if you're not receiving them, then someone else is. I finished for him. I'll pull what records I can legally share with you tomorrow, Rick said, and I could hear the concern creeping into his voice. This doesn't sound right at all. The next morning, Rick met me at Jim's restaurant on South Lamar, the kind of old-school diner where the coffee is strong and the waitresses have worked the same shift for 15 years. We sat in a corner booth with red vinyl seats that had probably been there since the Carter administration. Rick brought a manila folder thick enough to choke a horse. Harold, he said, sliding the folder across the scratched Formica table, I've got copies of every transfer authorization, routing information, everything I'm legally allowed to show you without a subpoena. I opened that folder and felt my stomach drop to somewhere around my knees. 8 transfers, each for exactly $200, each authorized by Tony's signature, each going to an account at Capital City Bank on Guadalupe Street. The recipient name on every single transfer, Harold Bennett. Someone opened a bank account using your name, Rick said, stirring his coffee and keeping his voice low even though the nearest customers were 3 booths away arguing about the Rangers pitching. The routing number doesn't match any bank you've mentioned banking with. I studied those papers like they were a puzzle I had to solve. Clean, professional documents with official bank letterhead, transaction numbers, authorization codes. Everything looked legitimate except for one crucial fact. I'd never opened an account at Capital City Bank in my entire life. Rick, I said, what about company credit cards? Does Lisa have access to any business accounts? His expression darkened. She's got a secondary card for client entertainment expenses. Why? Just wondering about the timing of her lifestyle improvements. Rick made a note in his pocket notebook. I'll audit those charges tomorrow. If there's anything irregular, you'll be the first to know. That afternoon, I drove over to Capital City Bank on Guadalupe. It's one of those newer buildings trying to look friendly and approachable, lots of glass and blonde wood, with a lobby that smells like coffee and fresh carpet. I walked up to the customer service desk where a young woman with perfectly straightened hair and a name tag reading Jennifer smiled at me like I was her favorite grandfather. Good afternoon, sir. How can I help you today? I need to verify account information for Harold Bennett, I said, sliding my driver's license across her desk. Someone told me I might have an account here, but I don't remember opening one. Jennifer typed on her computer for what felt like an eternity, her manicured nails clicking against the keys. Finally, she looked up with a confused expression. Mr. Bennett, I do show an account under your name, but our records indicate it was opened by someone else with power of attorney authorization. The signature card, well, it doesn't quite match your license signature. My hands were steady as I signed her clipboard, but inside I was burning with a cold anger I hadn't felt since the day I caught an insurance claimant faking a back injury while unloading concrete blocks from his pickup truck. Can you tell me who has access to this account? I'm sorry, sir, but I'd need legal documentation to share that information. Bank privacy regulations. I thanked Jennifer and walked back to my truck, but not before noting every detail of that lobby, the security cameras positioned above the teller windows, the way the afternoon sunlight slanted through the big windows, the professional photos of Austin landmarks hanging on the walls. If this ended up in court, I wanted to remember everything. That evening, I called Linda Rodriguez. Linda specialized in elder fraud cases and had helped my neighbor 2 years ago when his grandson had been forging checks. Her office was in one of those converted houses near downtown. The kind of place where you knew you were getting personal attention instead of being shuffled through some corporate law firm machinery. Linda, I think I've got a case of family financial exploitation, and I need advice on how to handle this legally. Harold, tell me what you've discovered. I walked her through everything, the missing transfers, the forged bank account, Lisa's suspicious lifestyle improvements. Linda listened without interrupting, making notes I could hear scratching across paper on her end of the phone. What you're describing is textbook elder financial exploitation under Texas law? She said, when I finished, it's a felony, Harold. Are you absolutely sure you want to go down this road? Family cases can get messy. Linda, she stole $22,400 from me while I was eating government cheese and shopping with coupons. She made me live like a pauper while she got spa treatments with my money. Yeah, I'm sure. Then here's what we're going to do. First, document everything. I mean everything. Every conversation, every transaction, every time she visits your house. Second, we're going to set up a situation where she has the opportunity to lie to multiple witnesses. Third, we're going to let her hang herself with her own words. The plan Linda outlined was elegant in its simplicity. We would create a situation where Lisa would be forced to either tell the truth or commit perjury in front of witnesses. We'd use her greed against her, make her think there was even more money available if she could just maintain the deception a little longer. Family fraud cases are won by patience and documentation, Linda explained. Emotional confrontations just give them the opportunity to claim you're confused or mentally unstable. But if we can get her to lie under controlled circumstances, with witnesses present, she'll convict herself. I finished. Exactly. Can you think of any upcoming family gathering where we might set this up? I could think of one. Father's Day was coming up in 2 weeks. Time enough to plan this properly. Linda, what do you know about inheritance law? She laughed, a sound that told me she'd been down this road before. Harold, are you thinking about some fictional inheritance that might suddenly come to light? Just hypothetically speaking. Hypothetically, if someone thought they might benefit from convincing you to change your will, they might be very interested in maintaining good relationships. They might even be willing to take some significant risks to appear trustworthy and caring. I hung up that phone feeling something I hadn't experienced in months. Not just anger at being stolen from, but the intellectual satisfaction of a plan coming together. Lisa thought she was smarter than the old man, thought she could manipulate me with smiles and small talk while she robbed me blind. She was about to learn that 30 years of investigating insurance fraud had taught me a few things about setting traps for people who thought they were too clever to get caught. The next morning, I started making phone calls. Time to organize a Father's Day barbecue that Lisa would never forget. The Father's Day barbecue was set for Saturday afternoon, 2 weeks after my discovery. I'd spent those weeks preparing like I was planning a military operation. Called Tony to suggest we make it bigger this year. Maybe invite Lisa's parents over from Round Rock. I want to get to know her family better. I told him, especially since I've been thinking about some changes to my will. That last part wasn't entirely a lie. I had been thinking about my will, specifically about how to make sure someone who'd stolen from me would never see a dime of what I'd worked 30 years to save. Lisa's parents, Robert and Margaret Thompson, arrived first around 2 p.m. in their sensible Toyota Camry. Salt of the earth folks, he was a retired electrician. She'd taught 3rd grade for 35 years at Cedar Creek Elementary. The kind of people who paid their bills on time and never took anything that didn't belong to them. Looking at them, I felt a stab of sadness knowing their daughter had turned out so different. I fired up the grill around 3, the same ritual I'd performed hundreds of times before. But this time I had Linda Rodriguez's small digital recorder tucked in my shirt pocket, the kind she'd told me was legal to use in Texas, as long as one party to the conversation knew about it. That would be me. Lisa arrived at 3:30 wearing white jeans and a silk blouse that probably cost more than my monthly electric bill. She'd brought a fruit salad in a crystal bowl, the kind of contribution that looks thoughtful but requires minimal effort. Tony followed behind carrying a case of Shiner Bock and looking relaxed like a man without a care in the world. After we'd eaten brisket that had been smoking since dawn, potato salad, corn on the cob, all the usual suspects, I stood up like I was going to make a toast. The late afternoon sun was filtering through the oak leaves, casting moving shadows across our faces around the picnic table. I want to thank y'all for being here today. I began feeling that familiar nervous energy I used to get before presenting evidence in an insurance case. Family means everything to me, especially since Sarah passed. That's why I've been doing some thinking about the future. Lisa set down her fork and I caught the subtle shift in her posture. The way she leaned forward slightly, like an animal catching an interesting scent. The thing is, I continued, I got some unexpected news last week. Turns out Sarah's life insurance company made an error in their original settlement. Took them 6 years to figure it out, but they're cutting me a check for $85,000 in additional benefits. The silence around that table was so complete you could hear the neighbor's sprinkler system cycling on 2 yards over. Lisa's eyes had gone wide and I could practically see the dollar signs reflecting in them. That's wonderful news, Harold, she said, her voice smooth as honey. I'm sure Sarah would want you to enjoy that money. Well, that's what I wanted to talk about, I said, pulling out my laptop, a skill I'd learned watching YouTube videos during the long evenings alone. See, Tony's been so generous, sending me money every month. Lisa's been handling all that, making sure I get every penny. Tony smiled, still clueless. Just taking care of you, Dad, right? So I thought I'd show everyone the bank statements, just to be transparent about how we're handling family finances before I decide what to do with this inheritance money. I connected the laptop to the small TV I'd wheeled out onto the patio, another technical skill acquired through necessity. Up came my bank statements, 8 months of transactions displayed in black and white for everyone to see. As you can see here, I said, pointing at the screen with a wooden spoon like it was a pointer, there are my Social Security deposits, my pension from Mutual Assurance, a few small deposits from odd jobs for the neighbors, and I let the pause stretch like a fishing line. That's it. No transfers from Tony. The only sound was the air conditioning unit humming in the background and someone's lawnmower 3 houses down. Lisa's face had gone the color of skim milk. Tony stared at the screen like it might change if he looked hard enough, then turned to his wife. "Lisa, what's going on here?" That's when I played my trump card. I pulled out the folder Rick had prepared, thick with documents and transaction records. The money went somewhere, though. Account opened under my name at Capital City Bank, but with a forged signature. Someone who had access to my personal information through family connections. Lisa's mother gasped, a small sound that cut through the afternoon air like a blade. Her father set down his beer and leaned forward, his weathered electrician's hands flat on the table. "I can explain," Lisa stammered, but her voice was shaking now like a leaf in a thunderstorm. "Please do," I said, feeling calmer than I had in weeks. "Explain how $22,400 of my money ended up in your account while I was eating at the senior center to save on grocery money." What happened next was exactly what Linda Rodriguez had prepared me for. Lisa broke down completely, tears streaming down her face, stammering about how she'd only borrowed the money and was going to pay it back. All the classic moves of someone caught red-handed with their fingers in the cookie jar. Her parents looked like they'd been hit by lightning. Margaret Thompson's hands were shaking as she reached for her daughter, and Robert just sat there staring at Lisa like he'd never seen her before in his life. Tony didn't say a word to his wife. He just stood up, walked over to me, and put his hand on my shoulder. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I had no idea." His voice was quiet, but I could hear the anger building underneath like pressure in a boiler. "I know you didn't, son," I said, "but now you do." Lisa's parents offered to help pay me back on the spot, bless their hearts, but I told them this wasn't their responsibility. Their daughter was 32 years old, plenty old enough to face the consequences of her choices. The legal process took longer than I'd expected, about 8 weeks from start to finish. Linda Rodriguez filed charges for elder financial exploitation, identity theft, and bank fraud. Turns out Lisa had also been using Tony's company credit card for personal expenses, spa treatments at the Four Seasons, shopping sprees at the Domain, weekend trips to San Antonio. Over $8,000 in unauthorized charges on top of the stolen transfers. The Travis County Courthouse on 11th Street isn't much to look at from the outside, brown brick and concrete that's seen better days, but inside that courtroom, justice felt real and solid. Lisa showed up for her plea hearing, wearing a conservative black dress, hair pulled back, trying to look repentant. Her lawyer painted her as a confused young woman who'd made poor financial decisions. Judge Martinez wasn't buying it. "Mrs. Bennett," he said, his voice carrying the weight of 20 years on the bench, "you systematically defrauded your husband's father for 8 months. You forged documents, opened fraudulent accounts, and used a position of family trust to steal from an elderly man on a fixed income." That gavel hitting the bench was the sweetest sound I'd heard since Sarah's last laugh. Lisa was ordered to pay full restitution of $22,400 plus $5,600 in penalties and court costs, 200 hours of community service at senior centers around Austin, and a 5-year prohibition on accessing any accounts belonging to Tony or me. Tony filed for divorce 2 weeks later. Once he started digging into their finances, he found credit card debt. Lisa had hidden online shopping accounts he'd never known about, and a pattern of financial deception that went back to before they were married. The months that followed were some of the best I'd had since losing Sarah. Tony moved back home temporarily while he sorted out his life, and we fell back into our old rhythms. Evening conversations on the back patio, weekend trips to Home Depot for house projects, Sunday afternoon football with cold beer, and Sarah's famous chili recipe that I'd finally learned to make properly. Tony's doing well now. He bought a modest house in South Austin, closer to my neighborhood, and comes by every Sunday for barbecue. He's been dating a nurse from St. David's Hospital for the past few months, Karen Williams, a down-to-earth woman who drives a practical Honda and pays her own bills. She makes him laugh the way he used to before all this happened. I used part of the restitution money to start volunteering with the Area Agency on Aging, helping other seniors who've been victims of financial fraud. Elder financial abuse is a billion-dollar problem in this country, and most of it's committed by family members. I've helped 23 seniors recover stolen money in the past year, teaching workshops about protecting accounts and recognizing warning signs. The Austin American-Statesman did a story about my volunteer work last month. They called me a champion for seniors and living proof that justice delayed isn't always justice denied. Made me proud, though Sarah would have teased me about getting a big head. As for Lisa, she finished her community service and moved to Dallas. From what I hear through mutual acquaintances, she's working retail and living with roommates. Learning to budget on minimum wage has apparently been quite an adjustment for someone used to spending other people's money. I don't hate her. Hate's a waste of energy when you're my age, and I've got better things to do with the time I have left. But I don't trust her either, and I never will. She taught me something valuable about family. It's not just about blood relations. Real family is built on honesty, respect, and looking out for each other without taking advantage. Every Sunday when Tony comes over for barbecue, and I see him laugh the way he used to before all this happened, I know we both learned something worth more than $22,400. Trust is the most precious thing you can give someone, and once it's broken, it takes time and effort to rebuild. But when you do it right, with honesty and patience, it comes back stronger than before. Lisa thought she was stealing my retirement security. Instead, she gave me a second purpose in life and showed my son what real character looks like under pressure. Some lessons cost $22,400 to learn, but the ones that matter most, about family, integrity, and standing up for yourself, those are priceless. That's something I'll take to the bank. If you're out there listening and someone in your family is taking advantage of you financially, don't stay quiet about it. Get help, document everything, and remember, you're tougher than you think. Justice might take time, but it's worth the wait. The best revenge isn't getting even, it's proving that integrity and truth are stronger than lies and greed. When someone tries to steal your dignity along with your money, show them that neither one was ever really theirs to take.